Look, when it comes down to it, sometimes one player can carry you in fantasy football. We call them league winners. It is early, but we have identified 6 players you need to target on draft day.
Now, if you're thinking it's May, how can you be drafting? Well, then you need to check out Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy has best ball drafts going full swing right now, all the way up until the season. They have drafts ranging from $4 to $500 with prize pools ranging from $100,000 to $15 million. That's right, $15 million in their flagship Best Ball Mania 5. If you haven't tried Underdog Fantasy yet, this is the time to do it. Just make sure when you sign up, you use our promo code ENDGAME and take advantage of this special offer. They're going to give you a special pick plus up to $250 in bonus cash. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com, sign up using promo code ENDGAME, start drafting right now, and take advantage of this special offer.
All right, let's start out early. This is a first-round pick that could carry your team, and you don't have to take him with one of the first picks.
Yeah, last year, CeeDee Lamb was a first-round pick that absolutely carried teams to fantasy championships. And he was the guy last year I was saying, outside of the obvious, top 3 guys, he was the one I thought could make that leap and become the wide receiver 1. And he did. And it's interesting when you look at him and Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's a guy I think can do it this year, very similar kind of trajectories to their careers. First 3 years, each one of them got better in every single statistical category every single year. So every year, their targets, their receptions, their yards, their touchdowns, they all went up. They got better and better and better every single year. Also, when you look at these guys as players, no, they're not similar players, certainly not similar prospects. CeeDee Lamb was a much better prospect than Amon-Ra St. Brown was. But when you look at them in the NFL, they play very similar styles of wide receiver. Both of them play over half their snaps from the slot, which is not very common. Like you look at the other wide receivers, the kind of alpha wide receivers, the Justin Jeffersons, Jamar Chases, Tyreek Hills, they spend a lot of time on the outside. These guys spend a lot of time in the slot, but I think that's actually an okay thing, maybe even an advantage in today's NFL with the way the game is going. And then the last thing, when you look at the similarities between these two guys, it's the offense they're in and the competition they have around them. You look at CeeDee Lamb last year, he basically was it. He was the only guy they had to throw to. Sure, they had Jake Ferguson, Brandon Cooks sometimes, but that was really it. It's the same thing with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Yeah, they've got Sam Laporta, and he's a good tight end, but he's just a tight end. He's going to be an absolute target monster. Would not surprise me if Amon-Ra St. Brown, kind of like what we saw with CeeDee Lamb last year, led the league in targets, receptions, yards, all those important metrics. And we actually saw an uptick in touchdowns last year. He got usage in the red zone. He's not just a between-the-20s guy. So kind of like CeeDee Lamb last year, who was entering year 4 and made that elite leap to become the number 1 wide receiver in all of fantasy. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown, also entering year 4, by the way, makes a similar leap and has a great chance to be this year's number 1 fantasy wide receiver. And if he is, he's going to be a league winner.
All right, I'm going to follow that exact same line of thinking. A wide receiver who you can get in the first round, you do not have to draft him early. In fact, I bet Garrett Wilson doesn't even go in the first round in a lot of drafts because you'll see more running backs go. And by the time those elite, what we consider those top 5 receivers, and then Amon-Ra St. Brown go, it's kind of not really clear who is next. Is it Puka Nacua? Is it A.J. Brown? Garrett Wilson? Maybe some other guys? And so you may be able to get an elite receiver like Wilson early in the second round, but no matter where you can target him, you should. Now, we were all over him last year, and there was every reason to think that he could break out in year 2. And then the season started, and then you know what happened, of course. Sorry, Jets fans, but let's take a quick trip down memory lane. Zach Wilson happened. Trevor Siemian happened for a minute, and then, yes, Tim Boyle, that was a thing that happened. That's what Garrett Wilson had to deal with. Despite all that, somehow, Garrett Wilson was able to put together a 1,000-yard season. Obviously, it was disappointing. Obviously, for fantasy standpoint, you did spend an early pick on him. You didn't get what you wanted. He finished as the number 32 player in fantasy points per game. But here's the good news. Despite that, he was number 6 in terms of expected fantasy points per game. I expect him to get close to that and maybe even do better because, as we know, Aaron Rodgers should be playing this year. Look, he doesn't need even elite quarterback play. It just so happens he has a future Hall of Famer as his quarterback, and even if he doesn't, look, it cannot get worse than what I just mentioned earlier. So at the very least, we know we have decent quarterback play, a player who's now finally ready to actually break out. He was number 1 in routes run last year, number 10 in air yards, number 3 in air yard share. And that's not going to change because no, they did not take Brock Bowers in the first round of the draft. No, they did not spend up to get a big name wide receiver. And I don't think Mike Williams is really going to be a big threat. Sorry. An older receiver coming off of a serious season-ending injury. Not going to scare me off Garrett Wilson whatsoever. So in this case, I think you can get what you were hoping for last year from Wilson and maybe even more because they did bolster that offensive line as well to maybe keep Aaron Rodgers upright. So I really think this is the year Garrett Wilson shows that he belongs among the elite. All right, let's talk running back. Usually there's someone who steps up big time to become an elite running back. Who do you think it is?
Yeah, last year when you look at kind of like the middle single-digit rounds, like round 5, round 6, Rachaad White was a running back that if you drafted absolutely helped you win your league because he was putting up top 5 fantasy games week after week after week for your fantasy team. This year, I think it's going to be Isaiah Pacheco, kind of going in that same range of most fantasy drafts, kind of being forgotten a little bit. But I think he's going to be the absolute workhorse running back in this Kansas City offense. And what's interesting about this Chiefs offense, when you look at it last year, they were kind of like right in the middle of the pack in terms of total points. Only averaged about 21 points per game, which is very, very low for the Kansas City Chiefs. Just 2 years ago in 2022, they were the number 1 scoring offense, averaging almost 30 points per game. And the year before that, they averaged over 28 points per game. I expect this Chiefs offense to look much more like the high-powered Chiefs offense we are used to, because not only did they bring in Marquise Brown, they also drafted Xavier Worthy. Even if Rashee Rice is suspended something crazy like the entire season, Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy is already a better wide receiver group than anything Mahomes had the last 2 years. This could be an offense that once again goes 30-plus points on most weeks of the season. And sure, a lot of those are going to come from the arm of Mahomes, but plenty of them are going to come from the running game with Isaiah Pacheco as well. Last year, we saw the Chiefs finally said, okay, you are our guy. No more messing around with Jerick McKinnon. No more messing around with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. You're the guy. And he was effective. He's a good runner. He's an explosive runner. And no, he's not a guy like Rachaad White who can catch 70-plus passes. But in this offense, he doesn't need to be. He will catch enough passes to at least be viable in fantasy. He can easily go over double-digit touchdowns this year. He could maybe even exceed 15 touchdowns this year with how good this offense could be. And not to mention with these weapons, with these deep threats, with these speed burner guys like we used to see with Tyreek Hill, we're going to see defenses playing a lot of soft, deep coverages, which is just going to open up those running lanes for Isaiah Pacheco. So I think this year's version of Rachaad White is going to be Isaiah Pacheco, just top 5 week after top 5 week and carrying teams to fantasy championships.
All right, I'm going to hit you up with a surprising name. Surprising that more people have not realized that Derrick Henry could actually be a league winner again. And it's funny how a lot of people seem to just kind of be writing him off because as time as Tennessee is done, it's an aging running back. Let's just get this out of the way with, first of all, Derrick Henry is not human. That 1 year, sure, injury happened, and since then, he has been fine. He's played a full season. He's carried the ball a ton. Age doesn't matter to him. Injury is not a concern. He's going to get the ball a ton because he is the feature back on a team that sorely needs a workhorse back. And don't tell me they brought Derrick Henry in to be anything other than a workhorse. There will not be some sort of a committee with Justice Hill or like Keaton Mitchell coming back from an injury or whoever else they happen to have there that they drafted in like the 6th round. Come on. This is going to be all King Henry, and we're going to see vintage King Henry. I think it's also understated how Derrick Henry did what he did last couple of years despite playing on a really bad offense. I mean, you think about this, last year they had a rookie quarterback for most of the season, and Tennessee has had one of the worst offensive lines. In fact, if you talk about going into this year, still Tennessee ranked 29th in terms of offensive line by PFN, 31st according to Football Guys, USA Today 30th, All right, this is a terrible offensive line, and that's even after they spent a top 5 pick on an offensive tackle. Derrick Henry had a hard time getting yards, and honestly, he could have done much better, except game script worked against them so often. They just said it's not worth using him up. Let's put Tyjae Spears in, give Derrick Henry some rest. And despite that, he still led the league in rush attempts. If we see Derrick Henry now on a top 5 offense, which Baltimore was last year, with a top 10 offensive line, which is what Baltimore ranks as, according to almost every publication. Just imagine Derrick Henry having his best season in the past 3 years. Okay, Derrick Henry is not human. He is somebody who can still be the number 1 running back in all of fantasy. I actually believe that. Now, I know that the passing down work won't be quite what some of the other running backs, are going to get. But that's why you don't have to spend a first-round pick on him. You get your RB1 in round 3, maybe round 4. Yeah, he can carry your fantasy team. All right, let's get a little bit deeper into the draft. Who else do you have in mind that could be a league winner?
I've got a QB in mind. I keep talking about Kyler Murray, but I don't get the Kyler Murray, why his ADP is so low, why he's going so late in drafts. This is a guy who 3 of his 4 healthy years has been a top 7 QB in terms of points per game. And the only year he wasn't was his rookie year when he was a top 11 QB in terms of points per game. Last year, of course, not a great year, missed most of the season. And then when he came back, Hollywood Brown was hurt. The offense was terrible. He was okay, but not great. But now there's all sorts of signs pointing to Kyler Murray bouncing back in a big way and once again being a top 5 QB. Number 1, he's healthy. He was not healthy last year. Remember, he was coming off of ACL. He still ran for almost 250 yards in 8 games. That's a 500-yard-plus yard pace, honestly, over 17 games. And that's with a not healthy yet knee. This year, it's going to be fully healthy. We could see 6, 7, 800-plus rushing yards this year. And, of course, 6, 7, 8-plus rushing touchdowns as well. We know how important that is in fantasy. But also, he got Marvin Harrison Jr., a true number 1 wide receiver to help this offense. Already had Trey McBride there. They also bolstered the running game with Trey Benson. I mean, James Conner's already a capable running back, but now you add in Trey Benson. This is going to be a much better offense. Whole new staff here, whole new offensive system. I think we see Kyler Murray have quite possibly his best year ever as an NFL pro and in fantasy as well. And right now he typically goes outside the top 7 or 8 QBs, sometimes around QB 10 in drafts. I don't get it. There are not 8 or 9 or 10 fantasy QBs better than Kyler Murray. There just aren't. He has top 5 upside. If you miss out on the absolute elite QBs in your drafts, just wait a little bit and get Kyler Murray.
All right, now I'm going to tell you that I think the top receiver in Buffalo is ready to break out and help you win your league, and that's their tight end, Dalton Kincaid. And yes, I firmly believe that Dalton Kincaid will be the number 1 receiver in Buffalo. I think this is what their plan is, to be honest. I mean, think about it. Stephon Diggs gone, of course. They did spend their first draft pick on a receiver, but Keon Coleman is probably the worst choice they could have made. Look, I could be wrong on this, but honestly, I think Keon Coleman, Xavier Leggett are guys that should have been like 3rd-round picks. Not the best choice there, but even so, he's a rookie. He's pretty raw, not somebody who's been overly productive even in college. So even if he turns out to be good as a pro, it's going to take some time. I don't see him being their leading receiver. I mean, come on, guys like Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel, Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Do we really think that the favorite target for Josh Allen is going to be one of those guys? It's going to be Kincaid, and Kincaid was already becoming more of a focal point in that pass offense. So, second half of the season, once the new offensive coordinator Joe Brady took over, Dalton Kincaid wasn't the leading receiver because Stephon Diggs was still there. But it's interesting that, Kincaid averaged 6.3 targets per game and wound up with 4.8 receptions. Stephon Diggs averaged 7.8 targets per game and yet had the exact same 4.8 receptions per game. Diggs was still getting the most targets, but they were equally productive, which is part of the reason I think they were okay letting Diggs go, besides the fact that he was malcontent. So Kincaid is going to be, I think, a leading target in this team, but also maybe the leading target getter among tight ends, because it's not like he's that far off of the competition. Sam Laporta, the tight end 1, but is he really head and shoulders above all these other tight ends? Travis Kelce, maybe losing a little bit. I think Dalton Kincaid has a legit shot, despite being maybe the 5th, 6th tight end taken. to be the tight end one in fantasy, because I think that's how high his usage is going to get this year. So I'm going to be all in on him this year. I'm probably not going to take a tight end first or second. I'll wait to see where King